to Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Sheridan, partially outdoors from the of technical difficulties. We're not sure that we have any announcements. We've been working on our technical difficulties. Sure. If those come in later, we'll be sure to announce them. Let's see. I have an opening reading. This is interesting, guys. Thanks for hanging with us. Okay. The opening reading is a heart no worth. We have a great deal more kindness than is ever spoken. The whole human family is bathed with an element of love like a fine ether. How many persons we meet in houses whom we start to speak to, whom we yet honor and who honor us? How many we see in the streets or sit within church, whom though silently we warmly rejoice to be with? Read the language of those wondering items, heart north. And our theme this month is freedom and responsibility. And the first couple of weeks were devoted to freedom. And now we're moving into responsibility. Victor will be presenting next week. And our theme this week is our responsibility to others, our moral responsibility to others. We will go ahead and do morning music a little early. Sorry, look at me for a second. You would be one of the Zach Brown.
So we live out in our old van, travel all across this land, me and you. And we'll end up hand in hand, somewhere down on the sand, just me and you. Just as free as we'll ever be. Just as free as we'll ever be. Down until the city lights dissolve into a country sky, just me and you. Lay underneath the harvest moon and do all the things that lovers do, just me and you. Just as free as we'll ever be. Just as free as we'll ever be. And ever be. No, we don't have a lot of money, No, we don't have a lot of money. 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 Oh, we need love. We're free as we'll ever be. Just as free. So we live out in our old van, travel all across this land, me and you.
Now we'll go ahead and light the chalice. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, to serve human needs, and to help one another.
I'd like to light the first candle of joy for a sense of humor when everything goes wrong. Also, Catherine Johnson sent in a candle of great concern for what is happening in our country and to our democracy. Strength and hope for peace of mind in figuring out how to deal with it and what to do about it.
I'd like to light a candle for things cosmic and wonderful. My daughter and I went and tracked the comet Neowise last night, and it's too bad we didn't have better binoculars. She could see it with her young eyes, with her naked eye, but it was really cool to see that. Again, sorry about our technical difficulties, and we thank you for your patience. And we thank Phil Gilmore for helping us with our situation.
Yeah.
That was good of him.
Candle for Phil.
Yes, we're lighting a candle of thanks for Phil.
I'm going to light one more candle of kind of a joy and a concern. The joy was two of my good friends got married last night and had a wedding at the Equestrian Center, and I was so happy to see that all of the people that were there from Gillette and from Jackson were masked up. Everybody, it seems like we're becoming more comfortable with being respectful of our neighbors, and that makes me feel really great joy. And also, like, just hoping that everybody stays healthy after that.
I'll light one more for the joys and concerns that remain in our hearts. If we get further joys and concerns that come in later, because we understand how hard it is to type and get them in here, we'll go ahead and announce those later on. Next, we'll have a story for all ages. It's a story that most people from Christian backgrounds are very familiar with. It is the story of the Good Samaritan. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, a lawyer asks Jesus what he must do to attain eternal life. Jesus reminds him of the commandment as it is written, that the lawyer must love not only God, but also your neighbor as yourself. The lawyer, seeking to justify his actions, asks for clarification of exactly who constitutes a neighbor that he must treat lovingly. Jesus replied, a Jewish man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a Jewish priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, a mixed blood race despised by the Jews, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he got 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? Asked Jesus. The lawyer replied, the one who showed him mercy. Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. Next we have our reading for meditation, for reflective silence. After the reading, you can take a few minutes to close your eyes or keep them open, but think about it. This is an excerpt written from our Touchstones resources. Unitarian Universalist theologian James Luther Adams said that we are fated to be free. Freedom is our fate. We are faced with endless choices, decisions large and small. How we use our freedom determines the quality of our life and the world around us. Adams reminded us that we cannot escape from the freedom and its responsibilities. Every attempt to do so is an act of freedom, an act that must be implicitly repeated at every moment. Freedom is our fate as well as our birthright, and we cannot, even if we wish to, slide back into vegetability. Even the abuse of freedom is a use of freedom. Hence, in our kind of world, every faith is, in a certain sense, a faith of the free, where it is a faith that takes us with the prodigal son to eat with swine, or a faith that shackles us to a political or an ecclesiastical furor, or a faith that generates freedom. We have no choice but to be free in the choice of our faith. The question is, what will you use your freedom for? Our message this morning is actually titled, May Your Pillow Catch Fire. That's why I actually called it Our Moral Responsibility to Others, because that wouldn't make a lot of sense without the reading. The author is the Reverend Scott Alexander, who graduated Star King School for Ministry in 1974. He's been a UU minister for many, many years, and is currently serving at the UU Fellowship of Vero Beach, Florida. May Your Pillow Catch Fire by Scott Alexander. It was still dark that morning in 1942 when the Gestapo rousted from the bed of the Jews of Bowawa, a Polish village. In the confusion, 12-year-old Samuel Oliner slipped away and hid on the roof, still in his pajamas. The next afternoon, when he dared to look around, the ghetto was silent. The Jews of Bowawa, murdered that day, by then were lying in a mass grave in the nearby countryside. Samuel found some clothes in an empty house and, skirting some German patrol, looters fled to the country. There, after walking for 2 days, he found his way to the farmhouse of Balvina Pichuk, a peasant woman who had been friendly with his family. Mrs. Pichuk knew when Samuel knocked on the door that she would be shot if the Germans found her harboring a Jew. Without hesitation, she took Samuel in. Balvina taught Samuel the rituals of Polish Catholic life, how to go to confession, how to pray, the catechism. With her help, Samuel posed as an impoverished Polish stable boy in search of work and a place to live. Thus, Samuel survived the war. It is with this moving story that a recent New York Times article on what makes for human goodness began. Clearly, it was Mrs. Pichuk's uncommon and courageous goodness which snatched this young Jewish boy from certain death. By some estimates, as many as 200,000 Jews, like Samuel Olinar, were saved from the Nazi butchers by good-hearted, non-Jewish rescuers. Now a group of social scientists is reaching, as they put it, into the cauldron of good and evil that was World War II, to study those exemplars of human goodness, to see if there are any common identifiable characteristics among those brave and beautiful people who altruistically risked everything to save others. The director of this project, you might be interested to know, is an eminent sociologist from Humboldt State University in California, a man by the name of Samuel Olinar. We went to find the common threads among the few who helped, Olinar writes. We want to know the differences between the rescuers and those who might have helped but chose to look the other way. He and his research team have already interviewed 100 of what another author has called the righteous Gentiles, and are racing against the clock to reach more of these good souls before they die of old age all over Europe. But Dr. Oliner's project on the sources of human compassion and altruism has been able to establish some preliminary conclusions about the characters of those who selflessly helped. I find them perfectly fascinating, as well as of vast importance for us as religious people who strive to be good. Again, these are the words of Scott Alexander, not mine. What the sociologists generally found is that most of those who bravely hid Jews from Hitler's final solution share two personal characteristics. First, these were people with a strong sense of personal self-worth. And secondly, they all had a clear set of compassionate human values learned in childhood. Now let's take each of these two foundations for human goodness in turn and see what they might have to teach us. First, I think it should not surprise us that these rescuers of humanity share a strong sense of personal worth and security. For doesn't it make perfect psychological sense that generally speaking, one has to feel good about one's own self before one is able to express much goodness towards others? This, of course, is not a new idea. For well over 2,000 years, Jesus framed his enduring gospel of human responsibility and goodness this way. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Even in his primitive, pre-psychological age, Jesus seemed to have intuitively understood that love and respect for self is the spiritual prerequisite for love and respect directed outward to others. In our time, it has been the humanistic psychologists, most noticeably Abraham Maslow and Erich Fromm, who have asserted that self-esteem and personal security are among the starting place for all healthy and humane human relationships and societies. And this makes such perfect practical sense, doesn't it? For how, I ask, can I be respectful and loving and nurturing toward humanity around me if I despise and loathe the humanness within me? If I don't respect and revere the manifestation of personhood I know best, namely my own self in this familiar little sheath of skin, how in God's name will I respect and revere those often odd and idiosyncratic human manifestations that are all of you? Clearly, love and respect for self creates the core of human affirmation from which love and respect for others springs. It should not surprise us then to hear that those compassionate few who saved Jews from certain death valued themselves. From the inside out, they knew of their own human beauty and worth, and therefore could readily see and want to protect the human beauty and worth of strangers when the knock came at the door. And isn't the opposite also true? When we are unkind or indifferent to human beings around us, doesn't our unseemly behavior most often have its basis in our own self-negation? Let me be the first to crawl into the confession booth this morning. Whenever I catch myself expressing inappropriate anger, mean-spiritedness, or cruel indifference towards other individuals or groups, I invariably discover that my lack of compassion says more about the ways in which I don't feel good about myself, rather than anything objectively objectionable about those to whom my venom is directed. Abuse, it usually arises from hurt. The abused or neglected part of me and my lack of goodness is invariably a reflection of my own pain and inadequacy as a person, rather than caused by anything wrong with those to whom my toxicity is directed.
And I frankly doubt that any of you, dear friends, are much different. When you turn your backs or withhold goodness and decency from some fellow human being, you undoubtedly do so from some wounded, broken, or soul. The authors of these studies on goodness are absolutely correct. The better you feel about your own self, the better you are likely to treat others. The psychological logic of it is undeniable. This is my thinking. This, however, does not consider narcissists in this feeling good about yourself, leading to treating others better. I did notice that. Okay, back to the Reverend Scott Alexander. And this truth leads me to the next point the sociologists studying the sources of human goodness have made. People who have shown themselves to be uncommonly altruistic universally had childhoods made secure by warm and nurturing parents. Adults who, through their generous expressions of love, help these individuals to feel positive about themselves and safe in the world. Dr. Erwin Staub of the University of Massachusetts puts it this way. There is a pattern of child rearing that seems to encourage altruism in later years. A warm and nurturing relationship between parent and child is essential. And this too makes utter psychological sense to us, doesn't it? For surely it follows that if our parents pass on to us a strong sense of our own personal worth and dignity, that we will naturally be inclined to confirm and celebrate the human worth and dignity of others from that core of happy wholeness and health. And this also, unfortunately, seems supported by negative example in our everyday experience. Whenever you read a psychological study of some heinous murderer and violent sociopath, you find that, almost to the last man and woman, these hurtful people had unhappy, insecure, and non-nurturing childhoods. Those who are hurt early, often grow up later to hurt others. Recent studies reveal that child abusers are almost always people who themselves were abused when young, though blessedly, many who were abused are able to healthfully move past these hurtful patterns. And thus we arrive at a truth for all adults that is important as it is obvious. If we want our children and the next human generation to act compassionately and respectfully toward one another, we must show them, by the living example of our thoughts, words, and deeds, that they are loved and respected. The only way our young truly learn that human beings deserve to be treated gently and humanely is by receiving that decent treatment themselves. It seems obvious from these studies that if we are able to have a better world where people are spontaneously treated with compassion and concern, we must first and foremost instill in our children an appropriate sense of their own self-worth, dignity, and value. But as Olener and the other social scientists studying human goodness are quick to point out, a healthy sense of personal worth developed in childhood is not in and of itself a sufficient foundation for altruism and goodness. For they have concluded that the second common thread they discovered in those compassionate heroes of the Holocaust is just as indispensable as the first, namely that all these good people possess a passionate values which had been passed on to them by their parents. Dr. Staub concludes that while a warm and nurturing relationship between parent and child is essential for altruism, it nonetheless, and I now quote, must be coupled with compassionate values, which provide the individual with the moral direction and strength to help others, even when it comes at great danger or cost to themselves. In another study of human goodness and compassion, Dr. Zahn Waxler agrees that the but moralizing parent who arouses the child to concerned action, the parent who is nurturing but not permissive, in that they have a clear set of moral and behavioral expectations for the child. Now, please understand that Dr. Waxler and the others are not talking about moralistic parents here who rant and rave for hours on end at their kids about what is right and wrong. What they are talking about are genuinely moral parents who, by everyday example, teach clear moral values and compassionate behavior. As Harvey Hornstein puts it in his fascinating little book called Cruelty and Kindness, children who become humane adults do so because they once had opportunities to observe loving caretakers being concerned about the welfare of other human beings. They learn goodness, quite simply, by example. And Dr. Perry London, who did his own study of the rescuers of Jews during World War II, adds that these human heroes had intense identification with the parental model of moral conduct. It seems then to be as Dr. Hornstein suggests, if the sins of the fathers and mothers are visited upon their children, then so too are their good deeds. It is surely, as I always say to the parents of infants during ceremonies of naming and dedication, as I charge them to their awesome parental responsibilities. Goodness, the parent's goodness, their goodness becomes the child's goodness. Their evil, the child's evil, and also their wisdom, courage, openness, and the adventure of their beliefs. So all of these diverse insights about the genesis of goodness in individual human beings says, give or take, the same thing. Children pick up compassionate values for adulthood by seeing those values lived out by their adult caretakers. And they must be modeled, not just mouthed, if they are really to become enduring qualities and realities in the personalities of the young. It's that simple. Unitarian bard Ralph Waldo Emerson understood this awesome moral responsibility of adulthood when he declared in the middle of the last century, "The gods we worship write their names on our faces, be sure of that, and man or woman will worship something. Have no doubt about that either. He or she may think that this tribute is paid in secret in the dark recesses of the heart, but it will out. That which dominates our imagination and thought will determine our life and character. Therefore, it behooves us to be careful what we worship, for what we are worshiping, we are becoming." And so for all of us who ever touch the lives of children, and that is all of us, parenting is a responsibility in which all adults share, must realize the power and importance of our role. More than what we say we believe, it's how we live, how good and loving we are to other human beings who share this journey called life with us, that has a large and lasting impact on those young folks who are so scrupulously watching. And oh, how attentively they watch, don't they? They don't miss a trick or any of our hypocrisies, do they? Their crack detectors are working full blast all the time. And I may add on my own here, any of you who have parented teenagers know that. And don't fool yourselves into thinking your everyday moral actions are less important. We are the shapers and molders of the next generation, and the quality of our deeds will go a long way toward deciding the quality of the human future. All right, all these observations about the absolute importance of adult modeling of human compassion and goodness surely makes sense to us. We have heard it all before, but I fear I've gotten ahead of myself in this discussion on the sources of human goodness, for I have not yet suggested just where the basic impulse to treat others compassionately comes from. I must ask, when all is said and done, What fundamental spiritual attitude of the human heart gives birth to goodness? I am shifting from psychology to spirituality now. Well, I suppose there are any number of respectable answers for so vast and important question, especially among free-thinking Unitarian Universalists. Simple answer. He suggests what makes for altruism and compassion in our world is people passionately feeling our fundamental connectedness with other human beings. We are good to those around us when we know, deep down to the centers of our trembling hearts, that they belong beautifully and irretrievably to us as fellow human beings on this holy and tender planet Earth. Hornstein believes that human compassion and goodness are fundamentally given birth in our world through people who spiritually feel, and now I use his nomenclature, the bonds of we rather than the barriers of them. This hopeful human idea, which understands the importance of seeing human connectors rather than the dividers, resonates beautifully with my understanding of the soul of our noble religion. For lying at the compassionate center of Unitarian Universalism is the astounding idea that every man, woman, and child on earth is a precious part of a family, the human family of universal belonging and mutual responsibility. Our liberal faith has a vision of humanity's indissoluble oneness, and there is no avoiding it. If we take our Unitarian Universalism to heart, it is up to each one of us to treat every member of our family with just as much kindness, justice, and respect as we can. Some religions in this privatistic and selfish age say little more than look out for good old number one, work on your personal salvation, get yourself to heaven, and never mind the rest of the struggling humanity. Such religion, dominated as it is by the goal of personal salvation, is little more, in my view, than spiritual narcissism, a selfish path of the heart that refuses to hear the crying demands for goodness and justice that lie beyond the immediate little sphere of self and family. Many are the tribal religions which cast the world into us versus them struggles. Sadly, in our time, many are the religions of individualism and isolation which free the believer from worldwide human responsibility. But ours, thank God, is a relational religion, a religion that would have us aware and alive to the irreducible ones that exist between ourselves and human beings everywhere. A religion that calls us into close, caring, compassionate communion with all people in all kinds and colors, no matter how different from us they might seem at first. Ours is a faith that has always dreamt of people everywhere becoming like family, one humanity relating in ever more intricate patterns of compassion and respect. I'm probably going to condense this a little bit. It's a pretty long talk. Unitarian Universalism is the demand to greatly and responsibly relate to life and persons around you. And this church knows, with Hornstein and other global thinkers, that genuine compassion for others is best and most beautifully born in the cockles of the human heart, which feels those indissoluble connections, the wondrous oneness. And we will only be generally good to one another when we know, by God, that every last human person with whom we share life on this fragile little planet is precisely a part of my family, my tribe, my country, me by God, and part of me. There is a wonderful Hasidic tale told by Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel, which I feel makes the reality and importance of our human connectedness with one another come to life. The story goes that a young man in Jerusalem wanted to visit Rome, which was then the ruling capital of the Western civilization. a very strange and different place from Jewish Jerusalem. His mother protested, as worrying mothers are wont to do, and asked him, "How will you eat? Where will you sleep?" He didn't have any answers, yet he still wanted to go on his adventure to Rome. His mother finally relented, but said, "I'm sure you will find food, but for sleep you must take this pillow. At night, go outside the walls of Rome and put your head on this pillow, and you will have rest." The son did as she asked, and each night after enjoying the sights, sounds, and carnivals of Rome, he would leave that city and take his pillow and find sleep in the countryside. But one night, right before falling asleep, his pillow caught fire. Why? Because that night the temple in Jerusalem burned. Wiesel goes on to explain that in his tradition, no member of the widely scattered Jewish community lives in isolation. On a very real mystical level, what happens to one Jew happens to all Jews, for they are spiritually and mystically bound together in one being, one indissoluble community. It was the precious bonds of human community and connectedness which set fire to the boy's pillow and kept him awake and alive to that which troubled his brothers and sisters back in Jerusalem. Okay, this spring we witnessed one of the most heinous expressions of evils of tribalism of the 20th century. I was at the Ramada Inn traveling, watching the evening news when the horrible images poured out of the television, and suddenly I found tears streaming down my face. There before me were the obscene newsreel pictures, you probably all saw it, of that Kurdish father and child, dead at the doorsill, murdered by Iraqi poison gas that day. And you could see by the configuration of their bodies that the father had desperately tried to protect his daughter from this war crime that no nation has committed since World War II, but had failed. We must say to the Iraqis and Iranians and all others who would slaughter innocent human beings in such evil ways, no, it is not acceptable. It is not acceptable. It is not acceptable. We will not trade with you, have an embassy on your soil, until you stop this heinous, evil behavior. Of all the many spiritual responsibilities that fall to us as Unitarian Universalists, none is more pressing than that of helping humanity to realize its holy interdependence, its indissoluble oneness. I want my religion, I want my Unitarian Universalist faith to call upon me to ever enlarge the capacity of my heart, to challenge me toward goodness and mercy when it comes at great personal cost. I want a faith that teaches my soul to organically feel the joy and sorrow of others, which reminds me of my inescapable responsibility to love and serve my far-flung, often difficult family. I want a church which refuses to let me morally and spiritually separate myself from the trials and tribulations of my global brothers and sisters, wherever and however I find them. I want a faith, if you will, that burns the pillow of my heart and keeps me awake, by God, whenever there is as much as one human being somewhere in need of my compassion or care. We will now have him, I'm forgetting the number, but we would be one. Please sing along if there's lyrics on the screen.
Of who we are.
It is now time for us to take the offertory. You can contribute online at Tithely, TIHTE.ly.com. There are also functional links from both our YouTube site and our fellowship's website. Sorry, I'm having a brain fart. For checks, you may mail Stein, 1590, that's 1590 Sugarland Drive, number B 206, Sheridan, Wyoming, 82801. Please be generous. As summer kind of goes along, we all get busy. It would be good to make sure we keep up with our responsibilities to our fellowship. I'm going to go ahead and bless the offering. Let this be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is so sacred to many of us, a community of memory and hope, for we are the keepers of the dream. Our closing words are from Barack Obama, former president. It's called A New Era of Responsibility. We honor those who embody the spirit of service, a willingness to find meaning in something greater than themselves. And at this moment, a moment that will define a generation, it is precisely this spirit that must inhabit us all. For as much as the government can do and must do, it is ultimately the faith and determination of the American people upon which this nation relies. It is the kindness to take in a stranger when the levees break, the selflessness of workers who would rather cut their hours than see a friend lose their job, which sees us through our darkest hours. It is the firefighter's courage to storm a stairway filled with smoke, but also a parent's willingness to nurture a child that finally decides our fate. Our challenges may be new. The instruments with which we meet them may be new. But these values upon which our success depends, honesty and hard work, courage and fair play, tolerance and curiosity, loyalty and patriotism, these things are old. These things are true. They have been the quiet force of progress throughout our history. What is demanded then is a return to these truths. What is required of us now is a new era of responsibility, a recognition on the part of every American that we have duties to ourselves, our nation, and the world, duties that we seize gladly firm in the knowledge that there is nothing so satisfying to the spirit, so defining of our character, than giving our all to a difficult task. This is the price and the promise of citizenship. This is the source of our confidence, the knowledge that calls us to shape an uncertain destiny. This is the meaning of our liberty, our creed, why men and women and children of every race and every faith can join in celebration across this magnificent mall, and why a man whose father might not have been served in a local restaurant can now take a most sacred oath. We're open for discussion if there's any such. We apologize about our lateness and our technical difficulties at the beginning. I know many of you might be a little bit behind and have other plans, but please feel free to type in or text in and let us know about any discussion you might have. While we're waiting on that, I would like to invite you to join our Zoom coffee hour directly after the service. There's the link in Victor's email on the service. So if you follow that, you can end up at Zoom coffee hour.
So for discussion, there's nothing coming in yet, but I will say like one of the best pieces of parenting advice I ever got was from this guy who used to be the vice principal at the junior high, and he said, your children will consistently fail to do as you say, but they will never fail to do as you do.
Oh, that's beautiful. Can I ask which vice principal it was?
It's Kim Anderson.
Ah, Kim.
He's a really good guy.
Nice, nice.
He's like, you know, they watch you, they see you. They'll do exactly as you do, even if you're saying something different.
Yeah, the old do what I say and not what I do is not a good example, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't give kids a sense of moral responsibility to others.
I really like that talk. A lot of food for thought. Have you ever heard of that study? I'm sure you have. There's like a psychological study on the Good Samaritan, and like kids at a like theological school, after having learned, they were taught the lesson of the Good Samaritan, and then had to go to another building to do something. They were given a task. Like, go to this building, you got to do this thing. And on their way, there was a person there who was like injured, who'd like fallen, was injured, and they were like, oh, I'm on a time crunch. I got to go do this thing or something. And like none of them stopped, pretty much. Like,
Really?
yeah, people at like a divinity school, like Harvard Divinity School or something like that. I mean, kind of jacked up.
Yeah. It also shows how good a rule followers they were. They didn't want to be late.
Yeah.
They didn't want to go to the
The
next.
people that were given a
Be late.
timeline consistently did not stop, and people who were not given a timeline. Too big a heart.